What is a phreatic eruption?
Phreatic eruptions are steam-driven explosions that occur when groundwater or surface water is heated by magma. Lava, hot rocks, or new volcanic deposits. The intense heat of such material can cause water to boil and turn to steam, generating an explosion of steam, water, ash, blocks, and bombs.
On where does the word gas come from?
The person who is credited with coming up with the word gas is Flemish physician Jan Baptiste van Helmont, 1577 to 1644. His experiments with gas and volume taught him that gases always take up all the space within a container, they do not leave a vacuum. Thus, he surmised that substances in a gaseous state exist in a chaotic form. The Flemish pronunciation for chaos sounds like gas, and thus the word was born. Earth. This is accomplished by plants and algae that conduct photosynthesis, removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and adding oxygen into it. It was during the Carboniferous period about 300 million years ago that plant growth dramatically changed the atmosphere, increasing the amount of oxygen to 35%. Today, the oxygen content is not quite as rich, 21%.
What's the difference between dew point, humidity, and relative humidity?
While humidity and dew point are both measures of the amount of water contained in the air, humidity is measured as a percentage of water/air while dew point is indicated by temperature. The dew point indicates the temperature at which the air would become 100% saturated. The bigger the difference between the dew point and the current temperature, the less humid the air is. It is therefore the same type of measurement as relative humidity, except that relative humidity is expressed as a percentage and dew point is expressed using temperatures.
What is a bolide?
Bolides are meteors large enough to create an easily seen fireball as they enter Earth's atmosphere. They can even be seen during the daytime and often appear greenish, though other hues have also been observed.
Has Doppler radar made tornado forecasting better?
Although predicting tornadoes is still far from a perfect science, Doppler radar used by the NextRad system has improved the accuracy of prediction to about 80%, versus about 30% before NextRad. Smaller, quickly forming tornadoes are still nearly impossible to anticipate, but larger tornadoes, especially huge tornadoes in the F4 or F5 category range, are being anticipated with much better results. In fact, the National Weather Service is often able to warn nearby residents of a large tornado 20 or more minutes before it actually strikes. NextRad can do this by searching for tornadic mesocyclones, which are a good indicator of twisters. Any large tornado vortexes can actually be seen by Doppler radar these days. Thanks to these advances, it is much less likely that a big tornado will take nearby populations completely by surprise. Even a 10 or 20-minute warning can be enough to save dozens or even hundreds of lives.
What countries are threatened the most from rising sea levels and may cease to exist in the 21st century?
Low-lying island nations of the Pacific and Indian Oceans are most at risk. Most notably Tuvalu and the Maldives. Other candidates for severe flooding and reclamation of coastal land by the impending sea include Bangladesh, India, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, and China, affecting the lives of hundreds of millions of people.
What is marine forecasting?
The complement to aviation forecasting. Marine forecasting warns seagoing vessels of storms and wave conditions. Such forecasting routinely saves lives, property, and fuel. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's National Data Buoy Center keeps track of ocean conditions, particularly issuing hurricane warnings and warnings about swells that may indicate tsunamis caused by underwater earthquakes.
What is a hurricane?
A hurricane is a tropical storm that has winds of 74 miles per hour or more that forms in the Atlantic Basin. Hurricanes typically occur in the North Atlantic and Caribbean Sea during the months of July, August, and September. When warm surface ocean temperatures exceed 80 degrees Fahrenheit 26.5 degrees Celsius, providing energy that feeds into the storm. Seawater evaporates into the air, creating clouds, while the Coriolis effect causes the clouds to rotate. For a hurricane to develop, there must not be a lot of difference in wind speeds in the upper and lower elevations of the storm. If there is a big difference in these speeds, the resulting wind shear will cause the hurricane to become unstable, with clouds and winds opposing each other rather than working together in a gigantic swirl that increases in speed. Hurricanes do not tend to generate close to the equator, within 5 degrees latitude, because the Coriolis effect is stronger farther away from the equator, and also because they need a low pressure area that is not close to the equator.
How were the first high-altitude photographs of clouds taken?
During World War II, cameras were mounted aboard some of Germany's V-2 rockets to take pictures of cloud patterns. The success of these efforts inspired meteorologists to plan for weather satellites.
How did the Kalpana 1 get its name?
India's Kalpana 1 satellite was originally called the METSAT, meteorological satellite. However, it was renamed in honor of Kalpana Chawla, the Indian astronaut who died in the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster on February 1, 2003.
What is a pulse Doppler radar?
Pulse Doppler radars, or simply pulse radars, are designed to better track the velocity of clouds, winds, and precipitation. They use radar in short, strong bursts with long intervals in between. To get accurate measurements, several pulse radars must be used in conjunction.
What was the greatest natural disaster in United States history?
The greatest natural disaster occurred when a hurricane struck Galveston, Texas, on September 8, 1900, and killed 8,000 to 12,000 people. However, the costliest national disaster to date was Hurricane Katrina, which hit the Gulf Coast in August 2005, killing 1,800 people and causing $100 billion in damages.
Why is there an ozone hole at the South Pole but there isn't one at the North Pole?
The harmful chemicals that destroy the ozone layer have to be carried up into the stratosphere by clouds in order to react with ozone. The land mass at the South Pole, Antarctica, creates the necessary weather conditions for this to happen. While the North Pole is covered in water, causing winds in the upper atmosphere to blow away pollutants. The bad news is that some scientists fear that increasing levels of pollution may result in a hole in the ozone at the North Pole in about 20 years.
What is an ombrometer?
An ombrometer, also called a micropluviometer, is just a technical word meaning a rain gauge.
Is the relative humidity always 100% during times when it is raining or snowing?
While the formation of rain and snow within a cloud requires humidity to reach a saturation point, By the time the precipitation reaches lower elevations and the ground, the rain, hail, or snow can exist within air that has a lower humidity.
What is a slough?
A slough is a layer of loose snow. On rare occasions, an avalanche may be comprised of slough rolling down a hill. But more frequently it is a dry or wet slab that causes an avalanche.
What is the intertropical convergence zone?
The Intertropical Convergence Zone, ITCZ, is a band around our planet where the winds from the southern and northern hemispheres rub against each other. The resulting convergence causes air to rise and is an ideal place for tropical storms to form, generally near the equator. The ITCZ changes position depending on the effects of the sun and seasonal cycles. Usually, there is one ITCZ, but sometimes a double ITCZ can form. Land beneath the ITCZ receives much more rain, up to 200 days annually, than land areas outside the zone, and shifts in the zone can lead to wet or dry weather.
When were huge snowflakes observed?
In January 28, 1887, in Ft. Kia, Montana, there was a snowfall that included flakes measuring a spectacular 15 inches. 38.1 centimeters, across. Of course, these flakes were not individual crystals, but rather clumps of crystals sticking together to form large flakes. Not long after these stunning flakes were seen, Shire Newton, England, experienced a storm in 1888 where 3.75-inch, 9.5 centimeter, snowflakes were seen.
What is the ecliptic plane?
The ecliptic plane is the plane of Earth's orbit around the Sun. Ancient astronomers were able to trace the ecliptic as a line across the sky. Even though they did not know Earth actually orbited the Sun, they merely followed the position of the Sun compared to the position of the stars in the sky, figured out. Despite the Sun drowning out the light of the other stars, where the Sun was every day. And noticed that every 365 days or so the positions would overlap and start going over the same locations again. That line marked a loop around the celestial sphere. Astronomers marked the line using 12 zodiac constellations positioned near and through the loop.
Can people's moods be affected by sunlight?
It is well known that, during the winter, people living in the northern hemisphere tend to experience more depression and listlessness. Sometimes called seasonal affective disorder, SAD. This syndrome may be caused by chemical changes in the brain during extended periods of darkness. In addition, the human body needs at least a few minutes of sunlight a day to generate vitamin D. Vitamin D deficiency is a chronic problem in many northern states in America, where it can lead to feelings of depression and a lack of energy and even libido.
Who came up with the idea for volunteer weather observers?
That credit goes to American physicist and mathematician Joseph Henry, 1797 to 1878. The second president of the National Academy of Sciences, who was also the first secretary of the Smithsonian Institution. Henry made advances in the area of electromagnetics, which led to his study in electromagnetic relays, which, finally, was the basis for Samuel Morse's, 1791 to 1872, invention of the telegraph. While secretary at the Smithsonian, it dawned on Henry that the wonderful new telegraph could be used to link together weather observers throughout the country who could then relay the information to Washington, D.C. This became the network of volunteer observers that we have today.
What is weather modification?
Since the advent of agriculture, when food supplies waxed or waned depending on the weather, human civilizations have wanted to control the weather. Ancient civilizations typically did this by praying to gods or to one god to bring rain and prosperity. In the 20th century, however, science finally seemed to offer hope that our understanding of chemistry and meteorology could be used to affect the weather. There was considerable hope that cloud seeding, discovered in 1946, could make droughts a thing of the past. The potential of this technique never met expectations, though it still can be used under the right conditions. Seeding techniques are also employed to reduce the size of hailstones so they will cause less damage. The Weather Modification Association, which was established in 1950, is still active today and supports research in this area.
What is the largest known meteorite to strike Earth in the past 100,000 years?
About 50,000 years ago, a metallic meteorite about 100 feet, 30 meters, across crashed into the Mogollon Rim area in modern-day Arizona. It disintegrated on impact, creating a hole in the desert nearly a mile across and nearly 60 stories deep. Meteor crater, or the Barringer meteor crater, as it is more commonly known today, is a remarkable and lasting example of the amount of kinetic energy carried by celestial objects. Just the lip of the crater rises 15 stories up above the desert floor. For a long time, scientists puzzled over the origin of this crater. It might have been volcanic in origin, they thought. But geological evidence, such as shallow metallic remnants in a huge radius miles around the crater, confirmed it was a meteorite strike.
Are there any other tornado strength scales in use?
Yes. In Great Britain, meteorologists use the TORO, the Tornado and Storm Research Organization scale, which is divided into T0 through T10 measurements of strength. A T0 tornado has winds beginning at 40 miles, 64 kilometers, per hour. An AT10 is a super tornado with wind speeds of 270 to 299 miles, 435 to 480 kilometers, per hour.
Where can I get an education in meteorology?
There are numerous colleges and universities throughout the United States and the world where you can earn a degree in meteorology. The American Meteorological Society publishes information on this in its curricula in the atmospheric, oceanic, hydrological, and related sciences, which can be accessed online at http://www.amatsoc.org. The U.S. military also provides training to interested recruits. Online and correspondence courses may be found, too. But these should be viewed more for informational purposes and not for a formal education. Unless the online courses are provided by a degree-conferring, accredited university.
What is a profiler?
Profilers use electromagnetic waves the same way that sonars use sound waves. This strategy has proven ideal for penetrating deep into the upper atmosphere, where meteorologists can then determine wind speeds at altitudes 5 to 10 miles, 8 to 17 kilometers, high.
What is a turtle?
In terms of meteorology, the word turtle does not refer to a shelled reptile. Rather, they are sturdy encased instruments that can be placed in the path of a tornado to measure air pressure, humidity, and temperature. Unfortunately, they cannot measure wind speeds, but they do gather this other valuable data.
What is clear ice?
Clear ice, as the name suggests, is clear, amorphous ice forming on surfaces as a result of water drops falling and freezing when the temperature is between 27 and 32 degrees Fahrenheit, -3 to 0 degrees Celsius.
Besides the 1974 tornado outbreak, what are some other serious outbreaks that have hit the United States?
On April 11, 1965, Palm Sunday, the American Midwest was struck by 37 tornadoes that killed 256 people and injured more than 5,000. An outbreak of 22 tornadoes on May 28, 1984, killed 57 in the Carolinas. Left 1,248 injured, and caused about $200 million in damages. The next year, on May 31, 75 people died after 41 tornadoes raged across Ontario, Canada, causing $450 million in damages. There were two terrible outbreaks in the early 1990s. From April 26 to 27, 1991, 54 tornadoes made landing in Texas and Iowa. 21 people were killed and 208 injured. The next year, on November 21, 94 tornadoes destroyed lives and property through 13 states, stretching from the Midwest to the East Coast. This outbreak left 26 people dead and 641 injured.
Is Moscow, Russia, colder than Minneapolis, Minnesota?
Moscow is at a latitude of 55 degrees 45 minutes, while Minneapolis is at 44 degrees 53 minutes. Nevertheless, they have similar climates. Both cities experience mean January temperatures of about 14 degrees Fahrenheit minus 10 degrees Celsius, while Julys are about 66 degrees Fahrenheit 18.9 degrees Celsius in Moscow and 74 degrees Fahrenheit 23.3 degrees Celsius in Minneapolis on average.
What do some people fear will occur in December 2012?
There is currently a growing number of doomsday believers who believe the world will end in December 2012. They explain that prophecies stemming from sources as diverse as the Mayan calendar and Nostradamus predict that human civilization will either be destroyed or dramatically changed at that time because a comet will strike the planet. Biblical numerologist Harold Camping has made a similar prediction, except that he places the date at October 21, 2011. Astronomers tracking comets, however, have found no evidence that any of the comets in our solar system are heading our way anytime soon.
Do tornadoes always turn counterclockwise?
As a rule of thumb, a tornado in the northern hemisphere will rotate counterclockwise, while those in the southern hemisphere twist in a clockwise rotation. But, as with any rule, there are always exceptions. Anticyclonic tornadoes, rotating clockwise in the northern hemisphere, have occasionally been observed. When they do, they are typically weaker twisters associated with weak storm cells or sometimes appearing as waterspouts. One of the strongest anticyclonic tornadoes was observed in 1998 near Sunnyvale, California. Even rarer but still possible is an event when a supercell generates both cyclonic and anticyclonic tornadoes.
What is the windiest place on Earth?
MT. Washington, New Hampshire, is the windiest place on Earth that has a weather station to record such data. In 1934, wind speeds were clocked at 231 miles, 372 kilometers, per hour. The average annual wind speed there is 35.3 miles, 56.8 kilometers, per hour. While no official measurements are available, the windiest places in the world are probably found in the coastal regions of Antarctica.
What is permafrost?
Permafrost refers to soil that is frozen all year long, even during the summer, for 2 consecutive years or more. Such conditions occur in areas where the mean annual temperature is 23 degrees Fahrenheit -5 degrees Celsius or less. Construction in polar regions where permafrost is found can be problematic, because sometimes the ground can thaw beneath a building that was constructed over frozen ground. When this happens, building foundations are easily compromised.
What is nuclear winter?
A nuclear winter is what would follow a large-scale nuclear war. Radioactive particles, dust, and smoke released into the atmosphere would create a large cloud over the planet, blocking out sunlight and reducing temperatures worldwide. Plants and animals would die due to the extremely low temperatures and reduction of sunlight. An extended nuclear winter could cause the death of millions of people from starvation, cold, and other problems.
What me scattering?
German physicist Gustav Adolf Pfeffer Wilhelm Mie, 1868 to 1957. Discovered how small particles in the atmosphere scatter light waves. Called Mie scattering, this effect is important to meteorologists. Studying how clouds and haze scatter light, meteorological optics.
Is the greenhouse effect a good thing for life on Earth, or bad for the environment?
Like so many things about life on Earth, moderation is the key. Some greenhouse effect is a very good thing for life on Earth. Without any such effect on Earth, the oceans would eventually freeze. If the greenhouse effect increases significantly, however, many living organisms and species, as well as environmental systems that have developed over a long time, including human civilization, will face substantial challenges, and possibly even extinction. In the most extreme case, a runaway greenhouse effect like that on the planet Venus would cause all life on Earth as we know it to cease to exist. On the other hand, many plants will benefit from increases in carbon dioxide levels, warmer temperatures, and longer growing seasons.
What is a 100-year flood?
A 100-year flood refers not only to the size of a flood, but also to the odds of it occurring. A 100-year flood has a 1%, or 1 in 100, chance of occurring in any given year. It has no relationship to the frequency of occurrence. The magnitude of such a flood is relative to the frequency of occurrence. So a 100-year flood is much larger than any run-of-the-mill annual flood. A 500-year flood has only a 1 in 500, 0.2%. chance of occurring in any given year, and would be much larger and more devastating than a 100-year flood.
What is the thermocline?
Imagine the water in a sea or ocean as being similar to very dense air in the atmosphere. Just like with the air, layers of water can have different temperatures and pressures, with warm waters generally being on top of colder layers of water. The difference between the temperatures in these layers is called the thermocline.
What is a nuclear winter?
Scientists Richard Turco and Carl Sagan made the world cognizant of the effects of a global nuclear war in the early 1980s. And Sagan published a popular book on the subject, The Nuclear Winter, in 1983. While most people were already terrified of the nuclear arms race that had been going on between the United States and the Soviet Union since the 1950s. The idea that every major city on Earth could be obliterated by atomic and hydrogen bombs was just the beginning. Sagan and Turco showed that it wouldn't even take all of the then 50,000 nuclear warheads to kick up enough dust and debris to block out the sun's warmth. Clouds of irradiated dust would be blown into the stratosphere, where they would circle the planet for months, plunging us into an artificial winter that would destroy crops and lead to a global famine. Since the publication of The Nuclear Winter, many scientists have come to believe a similar scenario could happen if a large asteroid hit the planet. Indeed, this is one theory about how the dinosaurs may have become extinct 65 million years ago. Another possible cause of a nuclear winter would be planet-wide volcanic eruptions. which some scientists theorize led to a snowball Earth hundreds of millions of years ago. Actually, when volcanoes are involved, it would perhaps be more accurate to call these volcanic winters.
How does weather affect Earth's rotation?
Imagine the water, clouds, and other gases lying on top of the Earth's crust as a big soupy mass that can shift around as the planet rotates on its axis and is tugged on by the Moon, Sun, and other planets. The oceans and atmosphere slosh around due to tidal action, bulging a bit on one side or the other, and this can hamper or speed up the planet's motion. In comparison to the total weight of our planet, the liquids and gases are fairly light. But the inertia they experience does, in fact, change Earth's speed. The amount of change is not noticeable to us, a few thousandths of a second each year. Over millions of years, however, this has a cumulative effect.
What is the difference between perihelion and aphelion?
Perihelion is the point where the Earth is closest to the Sun. 91.4 million miles, or 147 million kilometers. This occurs around January 3 every year. Aphelion is when our planet reaches its farthest point from the Sun, 94.5 million miles, or 152 million kilometers. Around July 4. This variation does not have much effect on weather patterns or seasons.
What is a geomagnetic storm?
A geomagnetic storm is the term used for a strong increase in solar wind activity, including intense X-rays, that affects the Earth's magnetic field.
What is an anticyclone?
Rather than having a low-pressure mass surrounded by swirling air, an anticyclone is an air mass centered around a high-pressure area with air rotating around it in a clockwise manner. In the northern hemisphere, and counterclockwise south of the equator. As with a cyclone, in an anticyclone air rotates faster the greater the difference between the air pressure at the center compared to the surrounding air.
What is the difference between a National Weather Service advisory, statement, watch, and warning?
The National Weather Service will issue a statement as a first alert of a major change in the weather. An advisory is issued when weather conditions are not life-threatening, but individuals need to be alert to weather conditions. A weather watch is issued when conditions are more favorable than usual for dangerous weather conditions, e.g. G. Tornadoes and violent thunderstorms. A watch is a recommendation for planning, preparation, and increased awareness, i.e., to be alert for changing weather. Listen for further information, and think about what to do if the danger materializes. A warning is issued when a particular weather hazard is either imminent or has been reported. A warning indicates the need to take action to protect life and property. The type of hazard is reflected in the type of warning, e.g., tornado warning, blizzard warning.
What is the National Weather Center, NWC?
The NWC is a partnership between the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, state organizations, and the University of Oklahoma. It is a scientific endeavor to better understand the weather, especially on a macro scale involving long periods of time and all levels of the atmosphere.
Has the weather ever been responsible for killing a U.S. president?
When U.S. President William Henry Harrison, 1773 to 1841, gave his inaugural address on March 4, 1841, the weather was miserable. Despite snow and bitter cold, President Harrison insisted on remaining outside and giving one of the longest inaugural addresses ever, 1 hour and 45 minutes. At 68 years old, the former general and war hero was not in the most robust health, and many blamed the weather conditions as the cause of President Harrison's subsequent pneumonia. 1 month after becoming president, he died, thus earning him the distinction of the U.S. president serving the shortest term in office.
What is Graupel?
Graupel, also known as snow pellets, is a funny word that means soft hail. It is created when supercooled water causes rime to form around a snowflake nucleus. Graupel is heavier and more granular than regular snow. Because of this, large amounts of graupel forming on a hill or mountainside can create dangerous conditions suitable for avalanches.
Why is Earth's magnetic field important to life on Earth?
Earth's magnetic field extends out into space, creating a structure called a magnetosphere, which surrounds our planet. When the magnetosphere is hit by charged particles from space, such as from the solar wind or from a coronal mass ejection, it deflects these particles away from Earth's surface, significantly reducing the amount that strikes life forms down on Earth's surface. This protects us from the hazards of being hit by too many such particles.
Does lightning only occur during thunderstorms?
Almost always, lightning is associated with thunderstorms. There are a few extraordinary cases, though, where lightning has been observed without storm clouds present. Sometimes, for example, erupting volcanoes can produce smoke plumes that generate the electrical current necessary for lightning. Even more rarely, smoke from severe fires can mimic these conditions, as well.
What is Indian summer?
The term Indian summer dates back to at least 1778 and may relate to the way native Americans availed themselves of the nice weather to increase their winter food supplies. It refers to a period of pleasant, dry, warm days from middle to late autumn that usually occur after the first killing frost.
Are some people allergic to the sun?
There are two rather odd reactions some people have to the sun. 1. Allergic conjunctivitis is relatively harmless. This is when sudden exposure to the sun, such as when leaving a darkened building, causes a sneezing reaction inspired by the sun's ultraviolet radiation. It can also cause redness and itchiness in the eyes, which is easily remedied with sunglasses and antihistamines. More serious is something called sun poisoning, which causes a rash known as polymorphous light eruption. PLE, with itchy bumps and swelling of the skin. Even suntan lotion does not prevent this reaction for people who are ultra-sensitive to the sun's rays. Topical corticosteroids are typically prescribed by doctors to treat the rash.
Does the sun emit a constant amount of energy?
The energy the sun emits, technically called solar irradiance currently, is much more than it did when the solar system was young. Scientists estimate that, billions of years ago, our sun only emitted about 75% of the energy it now does. Now, however, the amount of solar irradiance is fairly stable, though not completely constant. It can vary by as much as 0.1%, which may not sound like much. But such fluctuations are big enough to make the difference between moderate and frigid winters, merely warm or searing hot summers. Solar irradiance can be affected by sunspots, but the internal workings of the sun are still so complex that scientists do not fully understand what causes these fluctuations. Despite there being no complete consistency in the sun's energy output, astronomers and meteorologists still refer to a solar constant, which is the amount of energy of all emissions, measured in watts, per square meter. Readings are taken at the upper extremes of the Earth's atmosphere. which receives, on average, about 1,366 W/m2.
What changes in plant and bird behavior are indicating global warming?
People are noticing that spring is coming earlier, flowers bloom sooner, and summer has been lasting longer than in previous years, sometimes by a difference of 1 or more weeks. Bird migrations north and south have also changed, with bird watchers seeing species increasingly in northern climates where they have not before ventured. In North America, mammals such as possums and armadillos are also increasing their northern ranges. And a bit more worrisome insects such as fire ants and Africanized bees are also moving north.
What month is known for the most extreme changes in temperature?
July holds the honor for most extreme variations of temperature globally. Record extremes on the planet occurred when measuring the temperature in Libya versus the temperature at the South Pole. The difference between the two was 265 degrees Fahrenheit, 129.4 degrees Celsius.
Where do meteors and meteorites come from?
Most meteors, especially those that fall during meteor showers, are the tiny remnants of comets left in Earth's orbital path over many, many years. Most meteorites, which are generally larger than meteors, are pieces of asteroids and comets that somehow came apart from their parent bodies, perhaps from a collision with another body and orbited in the solar system until they collided with Earth.
What is a superior mirage?
A superior mirage, also called a superior image, refers to the illusion that occurs when light from objects is refracted in a way that makes them appear as if they are floating in air above the actual object. This can occur when warm air blows over cooler surfaces, the opposite of a common mirage.
What was the Little Ice Age?
The Little Ice Age was an interval of relative cold, beginning about 1450 and lasting until about 1890. The coldest periods of 1450 and 1700 are often divided into the two Little Ice Ages. It occurred during the current warm, interglacial period, but is not considered a full glacial episode, since the high latitudes of the northern hemisphere land masses remained largely free of permanent ice cover. Even so, much of the world experienced cooler temperatures during this time of at least 2 degrees Fahrenheit. 1 degree Celsius, lower worldwide average surface temperatures. It was a time of renewed glacial advance in Europe, Asia, and North America, with sea ice causing havoc in the colonies of Greenland and Iceland. In England, the Thames River froze. In France, bishops tried to halt glacial advances with prayer. Several historians also believe the low temperatures caused social conflict and poor food production. Thus, this may have been partially responsible for war and hunger during that time. Just like the major ice ages, no one really knows what caused the Little Ice Age. Though English astronomer Edward Maunder, 1851–1928, first hypothesized that it had something to do with solar activity. Other scientists attribute the cooling down to volcanic eruptions, changes in the ocean circulation, changes in the Earth's orbit, the wobbling of the Earth's axis, or even our planet's passage through clouds of interstellar dust.
What are some natural sources of air pollution?
Natural sources of pollution may include dust, methane from human and animal waste or flatus, radon gas, smoke from wildfires, and volcanic activity.
What months are the most likely times for tornadoes?
The height of the tornado season in the United States is March through August. Though tornadoes do form in the south during the off-season, more tornadoes occur in May than any other month. But more deaths have been logged during the month of April. One of the worst outbreaks of tornadoes ever recorded ran from April 3 through 4 in 1974. 13 states: Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, Tennessee, Kentucky, Alabama, Mississippi, West Virginia, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, saw 148 tornadoes touch down, killing 315 people and injuring almost 5,500. The tornadoes cut through 2,500 miles, 4,000 kilometers, of terrain.
Does the air have tides?
Strangely enough, yes. Just as with water, the atmosphere can be affected by the moon's tug on the Earth, so that air pressure can change in air masses daily. The changes are very small, though about 1 or 2 millibars/an. These changes are mostly seen only in equatorial zones.
At any one time, how many thunderstorms are occurring?
As astronauts orbiting our planet, especially over the night side, can attest, there are thunderstorms happening all over the place, all the time. On average, scientists believe there are about 2,000 active Thunderstorms happening at any given time, day or night. This gives us about 16 million thunderstorms every year.
Did volcanoes play a role in creating Earth's atmosphere?
Scientists now believe that much of our planet's atmosphere was generated by carbon dioxide. Water vapor, nitrogen, argon, and methane spewing out of volcanoes. When life began to form as primitive plant cells, the carbon dioxide issued from volcanoes was absorbed by these plants and then released as oxygen. At first, the oxygen reacted with iron and other metals in the Earth's crust, creating iron oxides that form the commonly seen reddish earth in the ground. Eventually, though, there was enough oxygen that it became part of the atmosphere, and breathable air was created.
How do tides work?
Two cycles of high and low tides occur each day, roughly 13 hours apart. High tides occur both where the water is closest to the moon, and where it is farthest away. At the points in between, there are low tides.
Can meteorologists predict tornadoes?
It is difficult to nearly impossible to predict where and whether or not a tornado will strike. All forecasters can do is warn people when conditions are right for tornadoes to form. Or, if one is sighted, to tell people to take shelter. Meteorologists look for tornadic thunderstorms that have strong indications of wind shear, lift, moisture, and instability. No one type of weather pattern leads to tornado formation, which greatly complicates forecasting efforts. To aid in their predictions, meteorologists use all sorts of technology, including weather balloons, Doppler radar, satellites, data from weather stations, lightning strike plots, and computer modeling.
Did people in ancient times really believe lightning came from the gods?
The power of lightning has impressed cultures for millennia. People, indeed, felt that it was a divine event and that lightning held mystical powers. The Romans and Greeks viewed them as spears, which were forged by the god Hephaestus. Vulcan, in Roman mythology, and then wielded by Zeus, or Jupiter, in Rome. Norse mythology gives the chief god, Odin, a spear made of lightning that he names Gungnir. And the Hindus also gave their god of war, and weather, Indra, a thunderbolt weapon. Sometimes, lightning was used as a symbol in these cultures. The Mayans used a triple lightning symbol to represent Hurricane, a god of creation who controlled the powers of wind, fire, and storms. There was also a belief, interestingly held by the Mayans, the Romans, and in Hindi culture, that mushrooms would grow in places where lightning struck.
What is plasma?
Plasma is the fourth state of matter, the other states being solid, liquid, and gas. It is formed when electrons are stripped away from atoms and a mix of free electrons and the resulting ions exist together. Plasma is found in stars, which makes it actually the most common state of matter in the universe. But plasma is also found in the solar winds that blow out from the sun and collide with the magnetosphere. Some plasma radiation makes its way into the ionosphere, too. Lightning is also a form of plasma.
How do airplanes create clouds?
When the air conditions are right and it's sufficiently moist. The exhaust from airplanes often creates condensation trails, known as contrails. Contrails are narrow lines of clouds that usually evaporate rather quickly. Contrails can turn into cirrus clouds if the air is close to being saturated with water vapor.
Is it possible to forecast space weather?
By understanding past solar activity patterns and comparing them to current observations. Astronomers can make some rough predictions about possible upcoming geomagnetic storms. This type of forecasting is important, so that warnings may be issued concerning dangers to orbiting satellites and other space missions, as well as the risks posed to electric power grids on Earth.
Does it rain in the Arabian Desert?
Located on the Arabian Peninsula and covering an area of some 900,000 square miles, 2,300,000 square kilometers. The Arabian Desert is, indeed, a very dry place, but rain does fall there. Some parts of this desert receive an average annual rainfall of a mere 1.38 inches, 35 millimeters. On occasion, flash flooding occurs because of rainstorms. The worst of these occurred in 1995. When a storm and high winds caused flash floods that killed 5 people near Jeddah.
How warm can the weather be and yet have snowfall?
It is possible for the temperature on the ground to be in the 40s Fahrenheit, 4 to 9 degrees Celsius, and still snow. This happens when snow forms at colder temperatures in clouds and does not melt before reaching the ground. In one case, a temperature of 47 degrees Fahrenheit 8 degrees Celsius was measured at New York City's LaGuardia Airport when snow was also seen.
What city in the United States holds the record for a dry spell?
From October 3, 1912, to November 8, 1914, a period of 767 days no rain fell on Baghdad, California.
How much pressure does the atmosphere exert upon us?
Average air pressure is 14.7 pounds per square inch, 1.03 kilograms per square centimeter, at sea level. Measured in inches of mercury, this comes to 29.92 inches, or 1013 millibars. To put it another way, a cubic yard of sea level air weighs a bit over 2 pounds. About 0.7 kilograms per cubic meter.
Why do the Denver Broncos have a particular advantage at Invesco Field at Mile High?
After the original Mile High Stadium was demolished in 2001. The Denver Broncos moved to Invesco Field to play football. Here, as with other teams in Denver, such as the Rockies, players have a distinct advantage over visiting teams because their lungs are already accustomed to the higher altitude. Fortunately, the human body can quickly adapt, and if a visiting athlete is able to arrive in the Denver area a couple days before a game, he or she should be able to play on a PAR with the locals.
What is LiDAR?
You can think of LiDAR as being the equivalent of a light radar. Meteorologists can use laser beams pointed at the atmosphere to measure such things as pollution concentrations and wind velocity.
What are the consequences in the United States when there is an unusually cool summer?
Cooler than normal summers can have both benefits and drawbacks. Drawbacks include poorer crop harvests and, in states where summer tourism is important, reduced income for businesses and fewer tax dollars for local government. People tend to run their air conditioners less, as well, which is good for the environment but hard on utility companies trying to maintain a profit. Meanwhile, consumers save on utility expenses. As one might guess, incidents of heat stroke and dehydration are reduced and hospitals see fewer patients stricken by these problems.
What is a katabatic wind?
A katabatic wind develops because of cold, heavy air spilling down sloping terrain, e.g., a chinook, moving the lighter, warmer air in front of it. The air is dried and heated as it streams down the slope. At times, the falling air becomes warmer than the air it restores.
What is paleoclimatology?
Paleoclimatology is a fascinating discipline that combines paleontology with climate studies. Understanding what the Earth's climate was like millions of years ago can prove very valuable in understanding today's weather. In addition, it's just plain cool to find out facts such as that dinosaurs once roamed Antarctica. Tropical fruits used to grow in Oregon. And just 8,500 years ago the temperature in Greenland was about 10 degrees Fahrenheit 5 degrees Celsius warmer than it is today. Paleoclimatologists discover this information by examining animal and plant fossils, conducting ice core studies, and examining soils and rocks buried deep underground. Clues may be found in some of the most unlikely places. For instance, when ancient pine needles hoarded by rats 30,000 years ago were discovered. The composition of the plant matter was analyzed to learn what carbon dioxide levels were like back then.
How many people die in the United States because of avalanches?
Deaths from avalanches are fairly uncommon, but they do occur. Often as a result of carelessness or from not heeding posted signs. Below is a list of fatalities covering the last decade.
What is the Umkehr effect?
Swiss astronomer Paul Gotz published a paper in 1931 in which he described how ultraviolet light is affected by the ozone layer. Ozone absorbs different wavelengths of light in the ultraviolet range at varying amounts. And these amounts change depending on the angle of the sun in the sky. Umkehr is German for change or convert. Measuring the difference between the amount of light being received at the two wavelengths can tell scientists how much ozone is in the atmosphere.
What are the Santa Ana wines?
When a high-pressure system forms over the Great Basin, usually during the fall, it pushes air masses downwards, causing compression that results in winds in California that elevate temperatures upwards of 100 degrees Fahrenheit 38 degrees Celsius. These winds can reach speeds well over 75 miles, 120 kilometers per hour in many cases, blowing down into the densely populated coastal regions. The dry winds of the Santa Ana help create conditions that make brush fires in the hills around Los Angeles and other cities much more likely. In fact, one of the most disastrous fires in California's history, known as the Cedar Fire, occurred in October 2003 as a result of strong Santa Ana winds. The fire destroyed 721,791 acres, 2,921 square kilometers, of land and burned 3,640 homes to the ground.